delay us much longer now. So welcome everyone. Looks like March is coming in like a lamb in certain spots, and it sounds like it's going to come in like a lion in other places. So hopefully we'll see what the season brings and if when we can get in the actual fields. So I'd like to welcome everyone again. I know Megan and John are both here from Thrive. So I know John, I think, will be leading the presentation today from my understanding. But if you both wanted to just give a quick synopsis on who you are, and then we can go to the presentation later after that, after I go through some of the other new members if they've joined us now.
Sure. Do you want to give us an intro now?
Just see as well. Yeah, so John Cassidy and Megan Croft are both from SVG. Is that the correct one? Uh, and they are looking after the Thrive program, which I don't want to go into too much details with, but I'll let them talk a bit on who they are and what they do.
Sure. Yeah, Megan, why don't you go first and I can
Okay.
fill it.
Nice to meet you all. I am Megan Croft-Chapka. I'm based in Lethbridge, Alberta. I'm the manager of ecosystem and partnership operations for SVG Ventures Thrive. So an innovation and investment group focused on AgTech and food tech. And we will be doing a presentation, so I probably won't go into too much more depth than that.
Yeah, likewise. John Cassidy, Managing Director for SVG Ventures and Thrive in Canada. Give you a full debrief of what we're up to and particularly what we're doing in Canada. We've been in Canada for the last 3 years. We've invested in about 19 companies in Canada, and globally we've invested about 130 in the agri-food space. So looking forward to giving you an update on what we're up to in a bit.
I saw Susan Murch also came in. Would you like to introduce yourself, Susan?
Sure. Good morning. I'm sorry I was a minute late. My Zoom updated at 6 in the morning. So I'm in British Columbia in the Okanagan, and I'm working with a group here called the BC Centre for Agricultural Innovation. It's a public-private partnership with the government of British Columbia, based at Simon Fraser University, and I'm based at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan.
BC Kai.
Yeah.
And I also see Jeff Paddock is in the room. Would you give your brief introduction of yourself as well? Good.
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, my name is Jeff Paddock. I'm the Partnership Development Manager at the Conestoga College Smart Center, and that's Smart Manufacturing and Advanced Recycling Technology Center. So what we do is we partner with industry members. We have various funding sources that helps offset any research and development projects that the client is going under. And we focus on advanced manufacturing, but we have gone into the ag tech space on a number of projects, actually. So, and I think one of the partners we actually met through this channel. So yeah, excited to meet everybody.
Fantastic. And I do have one other member, but I don't see them in here unless they're on a different name, but Mark Goldfield. I don't know if he's in currently. We'll take that for a no. If not, we'll address him the next meeting. But yeah, we will continue on to our presentation. So John, if you'd like to share your screen and go from there.
Sure, Martin. It would actually be super helpful, Aaron, if we haven't actually been in this group yet, give me like a 30, 60-second just overview of what you aim to, what this group aims to achieve, what you talk about, just so I've gotten the invite, but it would be great because it would help me tailor some of the structure around the presentation I'm about to give.
Yeah, so the working group is an association that's kind of driven around introduction of innovative agrobotics and the adoption ultimately in the Ontario market. We do have people that are outside of the Ontario market as well, that are obviously sitting in because they want to hear as much as they can and see that. So what we want to have is kind of a group that's made up of processors, producers, manufacturers, and academia that all kind of come together. And this is where we can essentially deal out that information to everyone. And then also have a bit of a round table so that you can communicate back and forth, because there might be someone on this call and then another person. If we can connect those two and then further the industry, that's even better. And then also creating the research so we can have adoption of this technology, because that way a lender will be more inclined to lend, and then a producer or a processor will be more inclined to implement this technology. So
Okay.
that's what this group's kind of pulling together, and then ensuring that that data is also prevalent. So that's another thing that we love to have input as we go forward. We're just in the infancy right now with the funding that we're getting, so we're formalizing it a lot more than it previously was. But it's a fantastic organization. It's been around for around 2 years. Correct me if I'm wrong with that. Three,
Perfect.
3 years. So it's been really
We're
well
putting
received.
Aaron, we're putting Aaron on the spot here. This
Yeah.
is he's got in a new spot. So well done, Aaron.
Thank you. I have
Yeah,
to
no,
present to the senators at the Western Fair after this, so
yeah.
I better be on my A game. So
Yeah, no, that's super helpful, Aaron, and I really appreciate that. And just finally, how long do we have here just to present, so I know I'm not taking up more time?
roughly around 20 minutes.
Okay,
That'll
that
give
should
them
be,
enough time, and then we can field questions depending on that as well.
that'll be perfect. Let me just hopefully share. I'm gonna share my screen now. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. But when I go into big screen, let me know if you're seeing. Second.
Looks good.
What screen? Are you seeing the full screen?
Yep.
Okay. So first off, guys, look, really appreciate the opportunity to present in front of you today. As I mentioned, we've been in Canada now for the last couple of years, and we're excited to tell you about what we've built across the country, some of the companies that we've invested in, but also some of the exciting things that we've planned for the future. I'm sure I've met some of the people on this call today, but would really love to connect with as many of you on the call and understand ways that we could potentially work together with some of the initiatives that we're trying to do. So as an organization, we've been in existence for about close to 13 years. Our CEO set up this organization really predominantly around the Salinas Valley area in California. I think at the time he was a senior C-suite executive that came out of Palm. I don't know if many people on the call remember the Palm pilot phone, but he was one of the first 20 employees of that company. Did quite well in the IPO, and then suddenly realized that there was a lot of technology driven in a lot of sectors, whether it be fintech, medtech, health tech, but technology was really light years behind where it should be in the agri-food space. And while Silicon Valley is a region filled with technology and innovation and investment, and while it's only an hour away from Salinas Valley, it really might as well have been on different sides of the planet in terms of technology innovation. And if you look at the accelerator fund model, what it traditionally was in 2010, 2011, very much centered in downtown New York, downtown San Francisco, downtown London. The idea that a technology-focused accelerator could be placed in a rural environment next to the customer wasn't that common. And we ultimately did that. We founded the Western Grower Center in Salinas Valley. And that's how the organization grew, which I'll go through what our model is and the pillars of our business. So just today, I'll just discuss about who we are, the global platform that we've established, our ecosystem, some of our program offerings of what we do, our accelerators, our pre-accelerators, our studio, and some of our growth initiatives that we've planned for the coming year and so on. I think as many of you on the call would probably understand, one of the focal points for agriculture to really, one thing that we've driven as part of our business model is really putting a focus on the ecosystem. Really why we've done that in a sense is that, farming and farmers and agronomists and many people within the agriculture sector, there seems to be a bit of a gap behind technology and innovation and also funding flows from an investment perspective of what that is. So like to put it into perspective, in around 2010, 2011, there was about 2.6 billion invested in agri-tech globally. And then in about 2001, there was about 56 billion invested in the space. So that trajectory growth tells a number of things. Number one is probably was underserved for many, many years and underinvested. And number two is it's taken a really big increase to get it where it needs to be. But obviously at that rate of increase, the sector the sector has had to make many, many changes for it to become a competitive sector in comparison to others. So what you've seen in Canada is you've seen growth to many venture capital funds that are focused on the ag sector, even in the last 2 years. What you've also seen is funds that would have been agnostic that are starting to think about the ag sector, not just because they have to from a sustainability perspective, but they actually consider it to be an industry where they can make great returns. I mean, that's a part of our job of what we do. And quite frankly, there aren't too many farmers hanging out in San Francisco drinking cappuccinos. And likewise, there aren't too many technologist founders hanging out in farms. So again, our ecosystem is predominantly built on corporates, farmers, government, research institutions, events, corporate partners and startups. Through our various programs across the world, we now track over 10,000 startups in this space. And I'll break those down into sectors as we go through the presentation. Here's our business model as a global entity. First and foremost, we're an investment fund. I'll go a little bit deeper about our new fund. We've invested globally in 127 companies. They range from, when I say AgTech, I also mean food tech, but oftentimes that leans into water tech or clean tech, or energy tech at some time. So we've made, in the last 3 years, we've made 19 investments in Canadian companies. 15 of those were from the US, and then the rest were from a Canadian fund, which I'm going to tell you about as part of the presentation. Globally, then we have about we've an accelerator program in Canada. We've a global one that's based out of the United States, and we've one in the APAC region that's centered in Melbourne. What that allows us to do, if you can imagine, every year when we do an open call for our programs, we get about 1,300 companies applying for our accelerator programs. And then if you can imagine from a fund's perspective, for a VC fund, the primary look for and what we want to achieve is quality deal flow. So the accelerator, getting all those companies, serves as a great tool and deal flow kit for our fund, and that's exactly how it's happened in Canada. One thing I will mention on our program side is we have launched a venture studio. We've been meaning to do this for many years. As an industry, we do feel there's a lot of research left on the shelf. I think Canada is probably a shining example of that through various IP complexities. Certain founders have been working on their technologies for many years and may not want to be the CEO of that particular business. And when you connect a research platform to a commercialization platform like ours, in essence, you create companies. And we've been building this out over the last 8 months to a year. We've already commercialized 3 companies out of that, and I'll explain how that works later on in the presentation. And then obviously a big part of what we do is we have a big corporate innovation team. Their predominant history would have been the big 4 consulting groups. Many of them have worked with big ag players in the space. So our corporates range from Driscoll Berries, Kubota, Yamaha, United Farmers of Alberta, Farm Credit Canada, and many others that I can chat about as well. And again, because we work with our corporates on innovation, we've often set between different acquisitions or other commercial arrangements based on our innovation services. So our most highlighted one, our publicized one, would have probably been Driscoll Berries leading the Series C round of Plenty, which is a unicorn vertical farm organization. And what subsequently happened based on that investment was Driscoll Berries now grow the majority of their strawberries in the United States in Plenty's facilities. Plenty came through our program. Driscoll Berries were a corporate partner. We put that deal together, and then they subsequently led their Series D round as well. So it just gives you an idea of some of the additional services that we offer. We've also recently launched a global initiative all centered around some of the global issues that I won't get into as part of this discussion, but obviously with with water usage, with emission reductions, and what some governments are trying to achieve. We launched this initiative as a driver for government and for corporates and for innovation like startups to bring together. So we center this on a challenge. We do a global outcall for companies in particular spaces. We do corporate roundtables, which include government, research institutions, science organizations, and smart farms. And again, it's all centered around innovative solutions that are tackling some of these global issues. And then it all culminates in a summit, which everyone on this call is invited to in November this year. This is our third year doing this. I would say of the audience, probably 20% come from Canada. Yeah, would love to, we can send you more information on this, and we'd love to have you guys participate as part of this initiative as well. What we also do is we do global challenges based on particular themes. So one of the themes that we've been really focused on over the last couple of years is the whole nexus between energy and agriculture. We're connected with a number of farmers as part of our advisory committee, and many of them quote and say, well, how can I go green when I'm in the red? And unless it makes financial sense, it won't be adopted. So what we decided to do, we attend many roundtables in this country, in the US and in other areas. And what we sometimes feel is that there aren't a lot of actions from roundtables. There's a lot of talk, and you're meeting on a cadence, but there's not much action. So we said, look, if we're going to do a roundtable on this particular theme, we have to do something with it. So we did a roundtable in Calgary on this particular nexus in November of just last year. And subsequent to that, we partnered with Alberta Innovates to launch a global challenge centered in Alberta. So it's been launched. There's a few big energy companies going to come in as partner to this. Many companies from Ontario have already applied and across Canada. And there'll be investment with that as well. There'll be access to many of the programs we offer. And we'll look at deploying some of those solutions across our corporate network as well. Here's just some of our when I mentioned those 10,000 startups of where we're tracking, here's the kind of breakdown of where they're from. I'm not going to go into this fully. You'd probably be more interested in this slide. So when we first entered Canada about just over 3 years ago, we were tracking about 102 companies across the country. When we first came in, we didn't want to be an entity that was deemed in any way competitive with any of the other great innovation solutions offered across the country. So we actually partner with many of them because many of them see us as access to US investment or scaling. So over the last couple of years, you may have seen press releases with us partnering with Zone AgTech in Quebec, with Olds College in Alberta, with the University of Guelph, with BioEnterprise. And again, the reason we do that is we are very collaborative. And that's been a big part of our success in Canada. And many of the companies that have come through some of those innovation departments that I just mentioned, many of them actually have been the companies that we've invested in or that have come through our programs because they've been recommended by our partners. So obviously, as you can see, we're quite strong in Alberta and in Ontario. We're starting to really increase our presence in Quebec. British Columbia the same, and look, we know there's many innovation solutions across the country, hence why we keep showing this map, because it keeps us accountable as well of particular regions, because obviously when we're speaking at the Atlantic Venture Forum in Halifax, many of them want to know what we're doing there, and et cetera, et cetera. So and again, I'll make this presentation available if it's interesting for anyone on the call afterwards as well. So again, I've spoken about our corporate innovation services. Again, I'm not going to go into too much of this, but really it's about for startups. I mean, the two things that they come to us about as some of their biggest challenges is investment and access to corporates, but also how to approach corporates. And we put that in as part of our program and as part of the service that we offer. We actually, from a scale-up perspective, so at the stage of around Series B and beyond, we highlight the top 50 food tech and ag tech companies across the world. Obviously, as you can see, we don't just look at numbers. On the right hand side of your screen there, we look at the complete supply chain of our analysis. It takes us about, I would say, about 9.5 months to produce this. We'd love to see something similar in Canada, because I think now, when we initially entered Canada, we were a little bit concerned around deal flow in terms of the quantity of companies that exist in this country. We knew there was quality there. We just didn't know there was quantity. Luckily, we were wrong on that. I never thought after 3 years we'd be tracking close to 1,200 companies. So again, this is something that we're looking at from a Canadian lens, and there's some Canadian companies in this. If anyone wants access to this top 50 report and some of the analysis that we do, again, I can make it available after the session today. One thing I'd like to mention as part of this call is, while our programs are great and we've been fine-tuning them over the last 13 years, really I feel we can't move the needle unless we invest in some of these companies and give them not just access to public funding, but also private funding as well. So we just launched we launched a Pioneer Fund, which is our third fund last year. This was a fund that was going to be a fund based in the United States. We had many interested strategics as part of that. However, good news from a Canadian lens is we were working with Farm Credit Canada, who's one of our founding partners from our program side, and we worked with them for about a year, and then there was discussions around them potentially participating in our venture fund, which is going to be a $75 million fund. Farm Credit Canada are actually now the anchor limited partner to that fund, which means they provide the majority or close to 50% of the fund. Obviously, Farm Credit Canada are Canadian FI. They care about Canadian companies. So of that global fund, 50% of that global fund has to be deployed in Canadian companies. So what was originally supposed to be a US domicile fund is now in Canada. And obviously, if you read any venture capital studies around geography, around how it flows, it normally doesn't travel too far outside where that fund is located. So while we have a contractual commitment to Canada as part of that, I would actually see it being a lot more because of the deal flow that we're tracking here. So huge win for Canada. And one of the hardest aspects, obviously, when you're going out raising a global fund is, will there be interest from international players when you've got such a commitment to one country? It turns out there is. So, part of our process in terms of raising is we have to sell the quality of companies that are in Canada so that they see the opportunity. So one of the other bigger investors that we got after FCC is a foundation called Argosy Foundation, one of the founders of Boston Scientific's family, based out in the United States. So hugely excited we're hoping to get a close of this fund in May. We've done a first close. We've made about 9 investments from this fund, and we're looking at a few more as well. One of our latest investments from it was a company called One Cup AI, which is a company that have employees in Alberta and across BC as well. And again, I'm not going to go through the full deal flow aspect, but again, as I mentioned, with our challenges, with our accelerators, with our pre-accelerators, and with our studios, it allows us to get such a unique proprietary deal flow in this space. So again, to provide a great service to our government partners, our corporate partners, and so on and so forth. So I've discussed kind of our 3 programs. Each of these, so the Thrive Studio, the Venture Studio that I've mentioned, the Thrive Academy, which is a accelerator program. So many of these companies, they're just coming into a phase where they're starting to prove out their technologies and start from a revenue cycle. And then both of them are global, but they're based in Canada. So it's like the Thrive Studio, while it's a global program, the 12 ideation projects that we took in as part of our initial sprint were all Canadian, every single one of them. And the 3 companies, obviously, that were commercialized as part of that were Canadian as well. Just because it's based here, it's just easy. So we work with the University of Lethbridge, Guelph, Olds College, and many other universities across the country. If there's any universities or colleges or any third level institution on this call that we're not working with yet, please let us know. Please reach out to us because we'd like to work with you. So when we initially, in our growth in Canada, we started to realize there was a lot of quality, I would say, in Alberta. The province of Alberta were quite strong on getting us kind of like located there and working with more Alberta companies. And the Alberta Innovates, which many people might know in the call, or an innovation department, come from the provincial government of Alberta, all centered around backing innovation. They released an RFP about 2.5 years ago, all centered around global acceleration. So if you look at it from our perspective, we have a global accelerator before we came to Canada. So we would have of our 10 cohort that we also invest in. We'd have companies from Israel, from Netherlands, from the United States, which, because we have such a vast geography span, it's very difficult for us to actually quantify our economic impact on employment, on indirect employment. But actually, when you confine it to a region, it can actually be much easier. So essentially, what we've tried to build is a scaled solution, centered in Alberta, but across Canada as well. Right from ideation phase with the studio into early company phase with the academy, then on scaling, and then obviously from an investment lens, that's how companies go. I recently heard a stat that 98.2% of companies in Canada are 200 employees or less, which means that Canada has a massive scale-up problem, and it's very resemblant in the ag space. Hence why we've tried to create this. And I think an attraction of investment, and also an attraction of international investment is going to help bridge that gap. And also organizations like ourselves will hopefully be a contributor to that. And I'll give you some of the actual metrics that there was a big news release on TV and on different news publications about some of the success of that scale up gap program that Alberta Innovates made us part of. We were successful in that RFP. Again, I'm not going to go into, like, I've explained the studio. If anyone wants to learn a little more about this, just let me know. The hardest part of this process is actually going to universities and speaking with different researchers and projects to get them into this and to commercialize. Our academy, as I mentioned, I will say that one of the biggest aspects of our academy and the success aspects is our connection to smart farms. So traditionally, if you look at pre-accelerators, they're very much classroom centered, but many of the companies that we're dealing with, they still haven't proved out their technologies. And if you look at many smart farms across this country, they're very good at engaging with corporates. So if you look at like the smart farm in Alberta in Olds College, for example, work with TELUS on rural connectivity, but really they haven't been successful in engaging with a startup community, which is actually, in my view, more important. The Tribe Academy aims to achieve that. So we partnered with a few smart farms, because many of the companies that we're dealing with need access to it. So it's been a big contributor and a success factor to this. I'm not going to go through all this. I know I'm coming on time here. I guess one of the media publications that we partnered with was Forbes. We joint founded the Forbes AgTech Summit, got us great global exposure, and obviously it's been great for our model. And again, as I mentioned, I know there's coming up in time here, but just some of the metrics, I'd recommend looking up the Scale Up Gap program that Alberta Innovates released 2.5 years ago. Here's some of the success stories from it. We've been a major contributor to this. And we are, by the way, like we are looking at other provinces right now across Canada to build out our program as well. Again, we release reports, adoption reports. I think many people on this call will realize that adoption is probably one of the most difficult things to counteract in this industry from a technology perspective. We've done reports on this in Alberta. We're doing a national one very soon. And again, what we want to achieve is growth across the country. We've been very strong in Alberta and in a few other provinces, but we're probably going to do more in other provinces very, very soon. If you want to know more about that, you want to work with us, you want just let us know. We're more than happy to chat with you. And thanks everyone for their time.
Thank you for that presentation, John. Any questions for John or Megan as well?
I think I'll just say, thanks very much, John and Megan, for the update from Thrive, and it's nice to see the ecosystems coming together within Canada. I think this is it's been a very fast moving last couple of years in the space. And I think the work that we're trying to do with the working group and with the innovation farms here in Ontario is very directly aligned to some of the stuff that has happened in other parts of the country. And we're also trying to not duplicate work that's already been done. You know, so one of the goals of this group is also to make sure that, you know, we're not operating like in a silo or in a vacuum. So I appreciate it very much.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, David.
Great news. I mean, this is great for Canada. I mean, it's great for Thrive too, but it's great for Canada, especially living next door to the elephant. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the Venture Studio? Because this is a new model around the world, and it's all about validating and achieving milestones. And that kind of gets people through the valley of death, which in Canada is a really big problem. So can you just kind of elaborate on the logistics, the funding terms, the, you know, just how are you using that model?
Yeah, it can operate a couple of different ways, and it's a good question. We've set up a program first, so you know, if we're out with, like, we'll source opportunities first, so we'll go to various PSIs across Canada, across different regions that we're operating in. And if you look at it from a corporate lens, we are working with about close to 50 corporates across the industry, so who have innovation issues and that are basically telling us, here's some of the gaps in the industry. So our ability to be able to fast track commercialization and influence commercialization will be quite unique. So how we operate from a programs perspective, we don't take any equity in that company unless it serves as an opportunity, or unless that particular person or people that are behind that research actually want to commercialize, and we see it as an opportunity. So of the 12 that we took in, we had about close to 90 applications coming in for a studio. We took 12 because we saw they were aligned with areas that we've seen as opportunistic. We've commercialized 3 of those that have gone into our academy. We haven't funded any of them personally. It's not something that we have, because a venture studio, in many respects, a lot of entities enter the venture studio world because they want to get 80% of a project, and they want to bring in a CEO, and that ultimately really negatively impacts the researcher or the person behind the solution. What we also have a responsibility for, I would say, is IP complexity. So we've tried, like, different research institutions across this country have various legislation around IP. Some of that IP can really negatively impact the actual commercialization, or people actually, a lot of the time, and there's a lot of research left on the shelf because of that. We've tried to be a voice to make it more founder friendly, I would say. So one of our big case examples in the US has been a company called Parcel, an organization, someone came to us with an idea. We joint built that. It's now part of a spin-out that we've done. One of our corporate partners, Kubota, as a lead investor in that, because we knew that solution would be applicable to them. We personally have invested in it from our fund. I would say in time, you will probably see us connect with, be more aligned with some of the federal, provincial grants across the country, particularly in Canada, to help that early commercialization. But also from a fund perspective, it's something later on that we would potentially invest in, but not in its current state, because we don't want to be a contributor to take too much of a company. It's just not a good business model for us, and it's also not a good look. Megan, do you have anything to add to that? I know you're working hard on that at the moment.
No, honestly, I think you got it all. Yeah.
So I assume you take a right of first refusal or an option on any of the teams that join that and get funded, and then just currently you haven't decided to execute those options.
No, wouldn't get right. We don't. Right of first refusal is not. We normally leave it to the person themselves. If you look at some of these researchers have been working on a project for 10 years, and they may not want to be the CEO of that company. So our I guess our efforts would revolve around advisory in terms of what they should do. And if it makes sense for an investment, that's something we consider. We haven't done it yet, but definitely something we consider. I see, David, you're from the University of Guelph as well. So I know Malcolm Campbell quite well, and Jessica out of his team. So we've had a few conversations about this. So give them my regards.
Yeah, that's our team.
Kristen, I see you have a question as well.
Yeah, I guess my question is about the overall venture capital that you're being able to pull together from Canada versus other jurisdictions. I think that in Canada, we do have a bit of a funding problem of startups, and I was just wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, I'd have a bit of an opinion on it. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's been difficult since when we have like a fund traditionally operates solely on returns, right? So now we have such a commitment to one country. It's difficult, but we wouldn't have done it unless we knew the deal flow and there's strong companies there, which ultimately there is. What I would say the difficult part of raising a fund, because obviously now that we have such a commitment to Canada, it makes sense that we are doing the majority of our raise in Canada. So when we look at like public funds, so in BC, Alberta Enterprise Corporation, Ontario Grow Capital is what they were called. I don't know what they're called. I can't remember what they're called now. You've got Funds FTQ, you've got Investment Quebec, and you've got many of these provincial funds that have their own rules and regulations around where capital is deployed, where fund managers are hired. And it makes it very difficult to work. When we've one commitment to a country, our ability to be able to just work in just one province and say that we're definitely going to do that, even though we might do it anyway, is difficult, I would say. And we can't be everything to everyone. It would be great if there was a national synergy between these provincial funds that support VC funds. I think it would actually really, really help the country. And I think what many of these funds don't have is, like, it's very difficult sometimes to get in front of them. And if you're like, we're a US fund, we want to be in Canada, we want to invest in your companies. Sometimes we feel that we're almost like taking time out of their day. Some of these funds, in my opinion, should have business development people behind them. So if they're going to Dubai or Sand Hill Road saying, hey, we know you might be raising a new fund, how about you do it in our country, and here's what we can do to make that happen. Whereas how it operates now, it's the other way around. So but great people behind it. You've gotten some great funds in. I think we're still trying to figure out how we might work with some of them, but it's been difficult.
No, I just think it's a good message to get out there to governments, because if we want to be competitive, we need to have access to those funds, and we need to make it streamlined so it isn't so difficult, so that we can get to the end faster. That's all.
Yeah. And someone made the comment on the call as well around you don't want to duplicate what's already going on in different provinces. The one thing I will say on that is, while you don't want to do that, other provinces are stronger in different, like, so when we talk about agri-food, people forget how many subsectors there are even within that sector. So like, Quebec and Ontario are very strong on dairy, hence there's a lot of technology solutions focus on that particular industry. In BC or the Atlantic province is very strong on ocean tech and row crops in the prairie. So while you don't want to duplicate, you also want to have similar platforms that are focused on maybe the sectors where they're strong in. So hence why we want to build out more across the country, and we're already in discussions in Ontario and Quebec about potentially looking at what we might do there. So and we'll love to talk to you about some of you guys from Ontario about that and how we might work together.
Fantastic. Thank you for your presentation, John. Really appreciate it. I will see if I can get that presentation from you, and we can put that up on our site. And then if you have any information on that summit in November, I'll be very glad to send that out to the working group as well. Thank you.
I just have one more comment. I think it would be a real value if the working group actually made a presentation to Thrive. I think that would be a tremendous value on, you know, all of the future planning of the innovation farms, but as well as how it's kind of come together and all of the contributors to date, and you know, just some of the technologies that we've been trialing, so that in some of the companies we've been working with, and maybe we can make some more connections that way as well.
Yeah, and what
I-
I'd like to do if you do that is actually not, because what I keep having to do, we sell Canada all the time to our global counterparts, and what I'd like to do is get some of our US team to attend that session, just so they understand all the good things that are going on in Canada. It's not just Canada speaking to Canada, it's you know, Canada selling to other areas across the
Yeah,
world.
I was going to echo that exact same comment there at the end, Kristen. So thanks for saying it actually better than I was going to say it. But I would agree with that, John, that you know, I've been kind of thinking about ways. I've been watching other countries having, you know, kind of delegations promoting their ag tech sector and why it's important. And I don't want to, no, Canada's not absent at these events, but I think the ag tech sector probably isn't as well represented as some of the other sectors. Is probably how it's an anecdotal thing. There's no science behind it, but I think you know, putting some structure around that might be a good idea.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a great suggestion.
Fantastic. I'm just going to go through some of the rest of the agenda. I just know there is time sensitivity for some people. So we have conferences coming up, and meetings and demonstrations. The London Farm Show being one of those, which is the 6th to 8th. So if you want to see myself or Chuck in person, please show up there in London, Ontario, here at the Western Fair District. And then there's also the Ottawa Farm Show, which is the 12th to the 14th, which is in Upland Drive in Ottawa. Then we have the New York Organics Summit, which is April 3rd to 5th, and then the International Symposium on Robotics and Automation on Monday, the July 22nd. If anyone does have any events or anything like that they'd like to show the working group or have added to this list, please feel free to send them my way at any time. Big update as well. We have our working group website up and going. It's our beta, but it is functioning. We have been uploading our agendas and our meetings there. I've just posted it in the chat there. So it's agroboticswg.com. Actually, I just sent the About Us page. I'll send you the actual homepage there. So if you go down, it has the events that are going on, and then obviously each of these meetings. We hope to add more information and post our annual report on here as we go forward, and have more value add for everyone using the site. Sure, everyone's off looking at that right now. But for funding, the Greenbelt Foundation is now accepting letters as well for the 2024 spring grant round, which is now open. Letters are due by the 22nd of March. There's 3 different categories. So they have the Resilient Greenbelt, Sustainable Greenbelt, and Accessible Greenbelt. There's a link to the grant and the guidelines there as well, if anyone wants to go through that. Agri Innovate is also open. OMAPRA SCAP funding for the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership. And I think we covered a lot of these other ones in the last little bit. ATII will be closing on the 28th of March as well. So that's something, if you want to put a submission in for that, please do that by the end of the month. I guess just before that. And then I will give us a bit of time now to do a round table as well, if anyone has any items they'd like to bring up or. Kristen?
Yeah, just one comment about some of the SCAP funding under the OAFRI, so the Ontario Agri-Food Research Initiative. I did hear last week at the show that we were hoping there'd be a second call for the OAFRI funding, but it was heavily subscribed to, so I don't think there's going to be a second call for the research or the demonstration portion of that funding. The bioenterprise accelerator part of that funding I think is still open, but yeah, so they were heavily subscribed. And I do believe that the AgriTech Innovation Initiative will also be heavily subscribed. That's the one that's closing on the 28th. So make sure you get your applications for this round in.
Perfect. Thank you. Chuck?
What I was going to say is we're the working group has a big presence at the London Farm Show next week. Subsequent to that show, the robotic technology that is geared towards the research projects is going to be, I guess, moved around to where they're going. We are going to have a meeting as part of this group to formalize some of those research projects and get kind of our group approval on that. So so kind of look forward to that information, coming forward. The other thing is I had a meeting, a very brief meeting with OCI, the Ontario Centre for Innovation. They have some new stuff coming up, which actually sounds quite interesting around the smart farm and agriculture space, which is not totally new to OCI, but a little bit newer than what it was in the past. So I will keep the group abreast of that as it comes up. Again, it links this whole process of smart farms, innovation farms, and all these kinds of things together. So that was very interesting. And I think that was it for myself.
Thank you. Brian Lynch, I see a question or comment or statement.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, I was just going to mention that with respect to the AgriTech Innovation Initiative that Kristen just mentioned, we found a few people approaching us for letters of support because the application requires a third-party sort of review or verification of the innovation aspect. So just putting it out there that if anybody needs help with that, they can reach out to us at Wineland. We're happy to sort of quickly turn around that sort of letter of support. So if you're a grower looking to get the technology, or if you're the tech provider looking to sell to a grower who wants to work with that initiative.
Thank you. Anyone else like the floor?
Well, Janice just put in the chat that OFA could also consider letter of support requests, as well as other organizations can as well. Yeah. So like,
So
for
just
the Apple. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, Kristen, just a bit of a clarification. We can only support essentially not-for-profits or academic institutions. We're not in a position to support private sector businesses at this time. But if the lead applicant is an organization or a not-for-profit type of entity, then we can look at that. So I'm happy to chat that through if anybody's sort of not quite sure, but we're certainly happy to engage and support where we can. It's just a bit of a tricky thing how we get involved.
That's good. Anyone else have anything they'd like to bring up or any updates? I was just checking to see if that last new member had joined us during the call, but does not look like they did. Give a quick introduction.
I think Mark is here, maybe. I
Is
see
he?
a Mark. Mark Goldfield, are you here?
Hi, Kristen. Can you
Hi.
hear me okay?
Yes. Hi.
Hi, sorry I joined late, but really interesting presentation from Thrive and really great to be part of this group. Maybe I can just quickly introduce myself. So I'm the trade commissioner based in our regional Ontario office. So that's part of global affairs. So I'm federal government. And my portfolio consists of supporting AgTech, ag innovation for Ontario companies to help them achieve their international commercial objectives. So part of that, I guess, ecosystem where I'm kind of promoting international business development. So this is super relevant for me as I kind of settle into this role. It's been about 6 months now that I've been with the regional office, and really looking forward to connecting with you all, and perhaps a bit later down the road could consider maybe presenting on the Trade Commissioner Service and how we work to support companies. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, but really glad to be part of this group. It was super informative, so thanks very much.
Fantastic. I might have to have you give a brief presentation. I'll put you on my list.
Sounds dangerous.
It's a good list. It's a good list.
Thanks, Aaron.
No problem. Thank you. Any other items that anyone would like to bring up? No. And any other questions for John, since we do have around 6 minutes? Mark, could you put your contact information into the chat? I think we just had one person asking for that as well. And David, yes.
Wow, if you want to burn some time, I can always ask questions.
For sure.
So John, how about you give us some opinions on where's the white space in the next 5 years in the AgTech sector? What do you think? What do you think is untouched and needs some innovation?
David, I've been talking a lot in this call, and my colleague Megan probably has more to say.
Okay.
On it. So I'm going to let Megan talk on that one because I'm talking too much.
Oh, thanks. And some of it might be my personal opinion. I'm quite interested in the aquaculture space, especially like on land versus in ocean. I think there's a lot we could be exploring there. I've been with Thrive for 6 months, so similar to Mark, still just getting up to speed myself. But my previous work was with Lethbridge College, and I was the director of applied research there. And one of the things we were working on was aquaculture and greenhouse together, calling it aquaponics. So I think there's still room in that indoor growing space. And one of the things John mentioned that we're exploring is kind of that ag energy nexus. And I think in that indoor growing space, if we can figure out some of those energy challenges that are holding back growing indoors, I think there's potential there. So energy, I think, huge white space, especially when we look at that from an agricultural perspective. The other thing I would say too is there's a lot of tech companies that are developing things for other industries, and they are not thinking about how it could be applied to agriculture. So we need to figure out how to reach those tech companies and get them thinking about ag and food. When I present, I bring that up, and I always joke, we all eat. And people are like, oh yeah, we do. So agriculture matters. And people just don't see it. So it's a couple of my opinions, and hopefully John agrees that aligns with Thrive. But yeah, there's also potential when we think about the climate and the opportunity we have in terms of sustainability.
Yeah, Meg took words right out of my mouth. Megan and I speak about 7 times a day, so that's we're fairly aligned on our thinking there. And I will put in some content into the chat, some video content that we've just released on. If you look at our themes, David, on our climate challenge, we single out exactly what we're looking for as part of those themes. So it's probably where our minds are going for the future as well. I'll put that into the chat right now.
Fantastic. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope to see you next week, and we can go from there. Have a great weekend.
Thanks,
Good
Aaron.
stuff,
See you,
guys.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye, guys.
Thank you, John and Megan. Thank you.